I wanted to start with a little bit of that Warriors chatter as we get closer to the beginning of free agency. Now 49 hours away. All the Draymond Green rumors continuing to swirl. He and Dame maybe getting together. Sacramento still hot and heavy. Are you still feeling confident, 99% certain that Draymond's going to be a Warriors?
Oh, I mean, it will be a absolute nightmare situation if he bolts. It's a 5-alarm fire. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
it's beyond a 5-alarm fire because you signed Chris Paul in order to make a run with your veteran core, and you got rid of Jordan Poole for whatever you think about Jordan Poole, and I've never been that high on Jordan Poole in terms of the fit here, but you got rid of Jordan Poole thinking you were going to run it back with Draymond and Chris Paul and whatever veterans you add, and we'll get into that list as we go. So if Draymond's out the door, that's a disaster.
That's a disaster. And immediately you're like, oh my God, they miss Bob Myers' communication skills. Because you know what I mean? That's what this is about at this point, right? If there's something unforeseen happening, I mean, the only thing I could picture that would interrupt this is if Vivek just was like, we are taking Draymond away, and we don't care about the price, we don't care about value, we don't care about our cap, we just want Draymond. And, it wouldn't be the dumbest move for Sacramento because Draymond's a culture guy, and they're trying to establish a culture. But, no, come on. If he's not back, I think it's all of a sudden nightmare situation.
Well, and Sacramento doesn't have as much room as, you think in terms of let's give him 35 or 40 million because they do want to keep Domas Sabonis, and they've got a question about Harrison Barnes, whether or not he'll return. They have other pieces that they need to add. So Sacramento can't go completely off the reservation in terms of giving him $40 million a year just to try to spite the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah, I mean, but he is exactly what they need to kind of break through and go from nice little story, improving team to Western Conference, title contenders. So, I mean, they need Draymond. It's just a matter of will they give him, and, what's the most they can offer? $35 million or something like that?
Probably, in terms of still being able to keep their own guys, and it just depends on, what they want to do with their roster in terms of the cap space. And the other piece of it is if the Warriors keep Draymond Green, whatever the price is, that's going to go into the future of Klay Thompson. Let's say Draymond signs for $3 and $100, as Bobby Marks, who joined us yesterday from ESPN, the great front office guru, you may asked him to guess, and he said, don't quote me on it, but he said $3 and $100. So let's just take Bobby at his word. And
let's quote him.
And let's just say it's 33.3 in equal doses over 3 years. Well, next year, 33.3, you want to make sure you're underneath that level 2 apron, as we're all learning with this new CBA. So you get rid of Chris Paul, but what does that mean for Klay Thompson in terms of how much can you give Klay Thompson? Because the Warriors absolutely want to avoid being in that second level apron, because then if you're up in that realm, you lose your mid-level. And the Warriors are going to need to add a mid-level next year to offset the loss of Chris Paul, assuming that he's gone.
Yeah. No, I mean, Green has to come back. That's where it starts, right? It starts with Green coming back, and I gotta think that after the Poole trade was made, that I really believe he leveraged that with Kerr's help, and I think there's I'd be absolutely shocked, and I would be really, really concerned about where it's all going if he's not coming back.
And if he's not coming back, then you're absolutely right. It's a level 5 disaster. It's a 5-alarm fire. But if you're Draymond Green between now and Friday, assuming that pen has not yet been put to paper, it makes fiscal sense for you to maybe court Damian Lillard, go to Sacramento and talk to Vivek and De'Aaron Fox, hang out with LeBron in Paris, and make it known that you are shopping yourself out there, and also you're represented by Clutch. So whatever Draymond is doing is only driving his price up now that Jordan Poole is out of the building.
Yeah, and this is his only opportunity in his career thus far to actually be in this spot, right, where he's being courted, he's a free agent. He's listening to what other teams have to say to him and what they're offering, and yeah, I mean, I think he owes it to himself to find out. Now, this idea that he needs every single dollar and this and that, I mean, come on. I mean, how much money do you need to be happy? He's already set. He's got a whole nother burgeoning career waiting for him. So to me, it's not about dollars. And the dollars are part of the equation, but it shouldn't be about the dollars. It should be about fit, and it should be about, if you're really all in on winning, it should be about winning. Do you think you got a better chance to win a title in Sacramento? You think you got a better chance to win a title in Detroit? Probably not. Maybe I guess you could argue LA versus the Warriors, but I would say, I think we as a society, sports fans, we hold guys who play for one team in a different kind of special category.
Absolutely.
And I think he's aware of that. So, why not try to go to the finish line with the Warriors?
I want to pick your brain on that coming up in terms of exactly what that means for guys like Kobe and Derek Jeter, but more particularly for Steph, Klay, and Dre. If the three of them do come in and ride out together, maybe not at the exact same time, but if they all retire as Warriors, what does that do in terms of their pantheon? We had Bobby Marks on yesterday, former GM. He's the ESPN front office insider, and he was talking about Draymond Green and what his market is.
I can't see how they can let him walk. And I know there's probably a price point, but let's just say you lose him for nothing. It's not like all of a sudden you got a $30 million slot to go sign a player here. You are still $12 million over the luxury tax. You got the veteran minimum exception. You're going to lose DiVincenzo likely here. What are your options here? Especially, hey, if Steph had a year left on his contract, I'd say, you know what, maybe this is the end, and you just start looking for. But when Steph Curry has 3 years left on his contract, you do everything in your power to put the best players around him. And I think, if it's Draymond, you're going to have to probably pay a little bit because there is a market for him.
And the market seems to be hotter than the Warriors would have liked in terms of Draymond Green's market, and his average annual value that they would like to pay is probably not going to be what they end up paying.
And all you need to do to understand the situation is watch one Warrior game and watch the way that Steph and Klay play off of each other, and that's his leverage. That's his beyond opting out, beyond everything. It's that the fulcrum of your team is Steph Curry, and there's already been kind of some whispers. Andre Iguodala actually said the quiet part out loud, basically saying, people have questioned have the Warriors every single year put the best around Steph and the 2 timeline thing. I think that, you want to make sure that you maximize this year and next year, right? Because if Steph's got 3 years on the contract, I would say the odds of him winning a title go down each and every year, right? Because he's getting older. So, he's further and further away from his prime, but he still looked really, really good this year. And so I think it puts a lot of pressure on this season for them to get it back and get in that finals again. And maybe that's one of the major things that led to the Paul trade.
Without a doubt, because Chris Paul, I think this year can be more helpful in a 1-year look than Jordan Poole could be, especially considering all of the things that have gone on here in Golden State and the fracture that happened in October and didn't get fixed by the time you got to May and you got ousted. And I don't know if it could have gotten fixed. As much as the Warriors have said it's fixable, they're telling you by their actions that it wasn't fixable, which is why you moved off of Jordan Poole to bring in Chris Paul. More from Bobby Marks, who actually pinpointed where he thought the contract would land.
I think the end number, so you opt out at 27.6. You don't leave that on the table. I'm going to say 3 for 100. That's the number. Don't quote me on it. But I think that's kind of what you're looking at as far as with Draymond, as far as this is his last big bite of the apple, and that there are suitors out there besides Golden State.
And as I told you, unfortunately, Bobby, we do quote you on that, and it doesn't mean that we're going to rip you if you're wrong, but 3 and 100, I did agree with him when he said you don't leave 27.6 on the table. You leave the 27.6 on the table knowing you're getting more than 27.6 back from that table.
And it's funny, too, because this has to be the right number for everything to work, right? I think this number, if it's too low, then, Draymond, it's like, why'd you opt out if you're going to take 25 and take less, right? That was your argument. He's not going to take less than the 27.6 or whatever that he was owed. But then also, you don't want to take the most. You want to be able to at least duck in under another offer, because aren't the Warriors going to go right to, if you are the belief that Klay Thompson's going to be here long term, aren't they going to, they're going to have to redo Klay's deal. They're going to have to give him an extension, and they're not going to give him an extension for $44 million.
Right.
So he's going to have to probably take less. So if Draymond takes a little less, isn't that an easier conversation to have with Klay about taking less?
They're two different conversations, and I don't think that they are inextricably linked, because Klay already got paid handsomely to not play. And that is just the way that went, because they gave him a max after he tore the ACL. He limps out. He hits 2 free throws. That's the last we see of him. They lose to Toronto. He comes back and starts to rehab and blows his Achilles. So he's out 2 years, during which time they gave him the max, and he made max money to just get better. So now he's at the end of his max deal. He's not getting another max deal. Now, does he get $20 million a year to stay? Is it $30 million a year to stay? A lot of this depends on where the Draymond Green number comes, in my opinion, because, Larry, it is official. The NBA collective bargaining agreement has been signed. The NBA and the NBPA, the Players Association, announced today the final long-form version of the CBA collective bargaining agreement has been completed and signed. It takes effect July 1, 2023, and runs for 7 years. And as a part of that new CBA, it's very punitive for teams above that second level apron inside the luxury tax. So if the Warriors can't get below the luxury tax threshold, which I'm sure they would love to do, but they're not going to be able to shed that much money and keep Klay Thompson. But at the very least, they have to get out of that second level so that they can get their mid-level exception back.
Yeah, I mean, I can see the value of that. Obviously, that's a huge thing, because the mid-level exception's a really good player, and you can contend for
like $12 million, I think, this year, right?
I mean, you can get a really, really good contributing, part of your rotation with that mid-level exception. My whole thing with Klay is just headspace. Like, it's not about the number; it's about how he feels about the number.
Right.
That's more important. So I would want to know exactly where he's at, and if I'm going, into the future with Klay Thompson, if I'm going to the finish line, I guess some people assume that they're going to the finish line with all three guys. I don't think that's a safe assumption, because I don't see avenues to get better. Really, that to me, it's a mistake to move Kuminga, and I don't think they're going to move Moody. So if you're going to get better, Klay's the only guy that you can move. But I understand that could upset Steph. That could upset their chemistry. But I need to know where Klay's head's at and what kind of number he's thinking about. And I don't know, Dibs, I personally just don't see the Warriors and Klay getting together on a price that's, I think the price that's good for the Warriors is going to be too low for Klay. And I think the price that Klay's got in his head is going to be too high for the Warriors. And I think that's what we call an impasse. And when you have an impasse like that, that's when you see a move.
And this is where you're going to have to really be delicate in terms of where all these numbers fall, because let's just take the Chris Paul contract out after this year. Draymond's in at $33 million, so that's basically about what Jordan Poole was going to make. It's a little bit more, so you're at about $150 million next year without Klay Thompson. So where does that second level apron start, and how much can you pay Klay Thompson in order to make him right? Because if you take Klay's year last year, 21.9 a game, he played 69 games, 33 minutes a night, and he led the league in three-point shots made. That's not a $20 million a year player. Now, it's not a $43 million a year player, but where is it in between those two numbers that he's happy with, and it keeps the Warriors from being in that second level apron in the tax penalty?
What do you do if where you're willing to go is he's not going to be in the right headspace with that number? Then what?
It's a difficult conversation, but I think the way you approach it is you go to Klay right now when July 1st hits and free agency begins and Draymond signs his deal, and you say to Klay, have a year. Have another year like you did last year, where he was shaky early on, then he was unbelievable, then he was okay, and then he was awful in the playoffs. He did not have a good series against the Lakers. If Klay has another good year where he's available, durable, and shoots the three at the same level he did last year, everything will take care of itself then, Klay.
We'll see. I see an impasse coming. I see an impasse coming because I think the Warriors are going to want him at a lower dollar figure than he's going to want to be at. And can he accept that? And then the one thing one thing I wouldn't want is I don't want a guy walking around going, I'm getting screwed. I mean, if he's in that headspace, that's not a good spot to be in. And that would make me move off of him. So I don't know. That's going to be interesting to see what number they're both satisfied with. Can they get together? Can they close that gap? Because, I think he's looking back and I think they're looking forward and the other thing is, how do you get to be a title contender? Like, I like their team right now, but I don't love it. And there's a lot of ifs. And by adding a 38-year-old injured player in Paul, a guy who's had a lot of problems keeping his legs healthy, and then you're playing up tempo, and then he's a year older, and then he's going to be, and you're taking off the floor a core younger guy who logged huge minutes for you. I don't see Golden State. I like Golden State's some of the moves they've made, and I think their chemistry is better. But like if they could cut the regular season in half, I think that would benefit them greatly.
Sure. Unfortunately, there'll be no strike as the CBA has been signed. There'll be no 50-game season. There'll be no 66-game season. They're playing the full 82. On the Comcast Business text line from the 650, what is the second level apron? Great question. This year, under the new CBA, it's a level above the luxury tax, and it's called the second apron. This year, that number is $179.5 million, which is $17 million over the luxury tax. So if you're at 179.5 this year, you are in that second level, and the Golden State Warriors are going to be over that number. You take Jordan Poole's 28.7 out, you add in Chris Paul's 30, you take Draymond's 27.6 out, and you add in, even if you leave Draymond at 27.6, even though I think that his number is going to be a little bit higher, you're already at $211 million. So you are over that threshold. Now, next year, the second apron will go up a little bit. The salary cap goes up. The luxury tax threshold goes up. So even if you put that second apron next year at $185 million, you're going to be hard-pressed to get under that number. Even by shedding Chris Paul, you're going to be looking at Klay Thompson making about $25 million to stay under that apron.
And this is a problem around the league because there's 13 teams over the cap and 6 crossing the luxury tax at 165. So, I mean, and the Warriors and Clippers are at the top of that list, I believe, as far as the big spenders. So, I mean, and the CBA has gotten very punitive because they're trying to put a lag on teams like the Warriors. And it's working, and it's going to, and it will work. So you're going to see more of an emphasis on the financial side and keeping your financial books in order, which makes these conversations even more difficult because it's not like you can say, scrap it. We'll just give Klay what he wants. We'll just give Draymond what he wants. There's a penalty if a severe penalty. What'd you say, a 4-to-1 payment, basically?
Yeah, even 4.5, I think.
Yeah.
On the luxury tax. And the additional penalty of being in that second apron is you lose the ability to bring a guy in at the mid-level, which is a $12 million player. And a lot of fans are saying, just bring in Brook Lopez. He's the perfect fit. I think that he's closer to a mid-level exception guy making $12 million than he is somebody who's going to be vet min at about $2.2 million.
Oh, and who was it that signed today? People were talking about, get him on the as a minimum, and whoever it was today I saw signed got far over the minimum. So I mean, it's I saw some of the names people are floating out there for candidates to get the minimum. And
was it Vucevic who signed?
Some people threw out Vucevic. Yeah, now Vucevic on paper is exactly what the Golden State Warriors need. They need a big man who's got some experience, who knows how to play the game, who can absolutely stripe it from beyond the arc, and is a force. A guy you got to guard at the 3-point line. But
he got 3 and 60.
Yeah, so he got $20 million a year.
Correct.
So the idea that he was going to be on somebody's minimum list, I mean, it's just unrealistic. So I think people just need to kind of get a rough idea that
it's a recalibration sensation, is what it is.
Or you just it's going to take a very unique person with, either willing to pass up big money, or has already made their money and is hell bent on getting a title, or really badly wants to play for Kerr, or really badly wants to play with Steph. I mean, there's going to have to be somebody who has motivation,
right,
that we don't even really necessarily know why they're coming here.